Welcome to my dojo. This is KungFuPizzaPrty, and I'm your host, Brandon Knight, and today is Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you out there. Today is the day to celebrate love, romance, and squishy feelings. But I want to take today to talk about the ones that got away. We're here, you're listening to this show because we all love the martial arts. We love kung fu movies. We love punching and kicking. We love the martial arts. I have had some instances where there's been some ones that have gotten away. Martial arts that have gotten away that I could have trained in. I could have been a part. It could have been a part of my journey. But they've got away. Much like that loved one, that one you're thinking about right now, that one in high school that got away from you. Yeah, it's that kind of a Valentine's Day themed episode, talking about the ones that got away. And by the ones that got away, I don't mean, I'm not going to sit here and talk about every single dojo in my community that I have not trained in, because honestly, that is going to mostly be a list of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a couple different karate styles. Like, it's mostly that in my area, and that's probably and Muay Thai, and that probably describes a lot of the martial arts in your area as well. No, I'm not going to be running down all the dojos in my community. Instead, there has been a few times in my life where the opportunity to train in a specific martial art, that the offer was there on the table several times, presented to me. Hey, come train with us. And I didn't pick up on it. And now I look back with regret and say, man, those are the ones that got away. I should have courted that martial art. And I know I said something there that probably may rustle a few feathers that I regret not training in them. Yeah, you're not supposed to live life with regrets. Here's the thing. I'm going to challenge that norm a little bit here today, partially because as somebody who's kind of an existentialist, living with regrets is just kind of part of the game, honestly, when you're an existentialist. Like, by no means are you supposed to, stay in a forever state of regret and let it define who you are. But I've heard it said recently, I think I was watching a documentary, about how a healthy dose of regret actually helps us to make better decisions in life. That to actually acknowledge, I made an unwise decision, a bad decision. I regret these decisions. I regret these mistakes. Actually can help us in a healthy way to make better decisions later on in life. So yeah, I'm going to own it. I have made some mistakes. I regret it. I'm not going to let that define me. I'm going to use this as a learning moment to, hey, next time there's just an offer on a table like this, I should really take the bull by the horns and dive into it, rather than, well, let me tell the stories first, and then we can get into why I let all of these slip away. But first, let me remind you all that here on KungFuPizzaPrty, I seek to deliver high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and serve up some wisdom one slice at a time. And I think we're going to do both of those here today. So the first unrequited love, is that the word for it? The first one that got away honestly wasn't my fault. When I talk about my history of training in the martial arts, I talked about that a little bit back in the very first episode, but if you haven't listened to that episode, I have, over the past 20 years, I have trained in Taekwondo, Jeet Kune Do, Hapkido, Ninpo Taijutsu, and currently I am a ninja coach with Ninja Zone at my local YMCA. So that's kind of a little bit of my background in the martial arts. I started in as a kid in elementary school, training in Taekwondo, did it up through about middle school or so. By that point, there was a couple changes. The dojang relocated, and that kind of put a little bit of a difficulty for me and my parents getting me out there to train. But also, by middle school, a lot of my friends in school were playing sports, and I just wanted to be cool like them and hang out with them. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try basketball. I'm going to try soccer, football for a little bit and see how it goes. Basketball was fine. I hated soccer in middle school. I just played it because my friends were on the team. I will say this, though. I was that toxic, like, early 2000s kid who was like, I don't like soccer because it's European. That was really dumb. I should not have had that mentality. Nowadays, I do like soccer, football a lot more. I don't watch it as much, but, I do like it, and I do enjoy playing it, like pick up every once in a while. Anyway, so by about my sophomore year of high school, I started my Bruce Lee era. And every martial artist knows that once you start your Bruce Lee era, you're never not in your Bruce Lee era. But that's when I started my Bruce Lee era. I bought all of his books, bought all of his movies, and found a place in my actually a church that was like within walking distance of my house growing up that taught Jeet Kune Do. And so I just really threw myself into Jeet Kune Do. But technically, there was a step in between Taekwondo and Jeet Kune Do. Right around my freshman year of high school, I think it was, there was a local community center near my house, not as close as that church, but still close to where I grew up, that was going to start offering classes in Wushu. And I was really into the idea. I was already, by my freshman year of high school, was really looking into getting back into the martial arts. Honestly, my memory is a little fuzzy. It could have been like late 8th grade, early 9th grade, if I'm being honest. I can't really remember the exact time period, but I was ready to get back into the martial arts. This was definitely my thing, and Wushu caught my attention. I wanted to train in a Kung Fu style. Jet Li is associated with Wushu, and that's always been kind of like my thing. I always look at, like, when I go into a martial art, I like looking to see who are, like, people who have trained in it as someone that I can like look to and find inspiration in. So I was like, okay, so Jet Li, Wushu, Kung Fu style, very acrobatic, a lot of gymnastics, very different from Taekwondo. So that'll be a good like challenge to me in my training. So yeah, let's do it. And for my parents who had to drive me, it was very convenient, right up the road, still kind of like a couple blocks away from the house. So I show up for the first class, and I am like significantly older than everyone else in this class, which when you're a young teenager, or really when you're just a teenager in general, it's kind of embarrassing, honestly. I can remember like, oh, I'm just going to make this work, but I am a lot bigger than all the rest of these kids in this class. And by bigger, I don't mean like husky. I mean like I'm taller, I'm older than a lot of these kids. But the advantage to being so much older is that after the class, I went up to the instructor, and not only was I, like a teenager, but I talked about how I did Taekwondo, really excited to get back into the martial arts. And so she took a few minutes after the class to start teaching me the first kata, the first form. I don't know I can't remember if there's a specific term in Kung Fu for those sequences of moves that you do to simulate a fight. But she started teaching me the first one. It was like wolf style or something. I don't know. And that was great. In between that first class and that second class, she was scheduled, the instructor, the master, the Sifu, was scheduled to have some surgery done. But thankfully, since they had a second dojo, their main studio was in Chicago, she sent one of the student instructors for the second class. Same kind of a thing, me and a lot of kids doing like cartwheels, kicks, things like that. And then afterwards showed him what I had learned the previous week of the form. I remember it being pretty simple. I remember it being pretty simple, and I worked on it like at home. So we get to the end of class, I show it to him, he teaches me the next few techniques. There may have been a third class, I really don't remember, but then it got canceled. The whole program, not just the class, but like the whole program got shut down. Essentially, for the master, from what it was presented, not only did they had just gotten this surgery, but because they were coming from Chicago, which was at least a 30-minute commute, possibly more, depending on traffic and where exactly in Chicago they were coming from. Like, it was gonna at least be a 30-minute commute. It just was not working for them, so they canceled the whole program. And that was it. Never heard from them again. Was not going to be able... My parents were like, no, we cannot take you to Chicago once a week for wushu. Like, sorry, you can't do that. We can't do that. We can't afford that. We can't put that. That's a lot. That's a lot of commitment on our part for this, so sorry. And honestly, I don't really blame them for that either, because I felt hurt. Honestly, like, that was the one and only time in my martial art training that I felt left high and dry by a master, of just like, never mind, this isn't working, bye. Like, just very little commitment. And this is part of the reason why that hurt is part of the reason why I don't really count wushu as part of my like training resume. The other reason why I don't really count wushu as part of my training is because nothing stuck. I have nothing to show for it. And that's not a knock against the style. That is a knock against the instructor. Yes, this is not a knock against wushu whatsoever. Honestly, one of the reasons why I regret this situation I was put in is because where I'm at now, wushu with Ninja Zone, wushu could have helped me so much to prepare me for this job. Like, Ninja Zone does look for people who have done Taekwondo because of the trick kick elements in Ninja Zone. But honestly, with wushu, with the gymnastics, the flexibility training, like, I think it would have been so helpful for me to with the place I am at now. That and like capoeira probably would be another style that would be super helpful for Ninja Zone. But like, honestly, now as an adult, I've looked around, there is no place nearby that does wushu. And I'm like, maybe I should just start buying books and watching videos and teach myself this thing. Because it is kind of like the one that got away. Like, I wanted this to work, and I think it could really help with my job now. But the other reason why I don't really count it is not just because I'm hurt. I was hurt by it. It's because I have nothing to show for this. And I mean that in both skill and in trinkety things. Nothing within that 2, maybe 3 weeks really stuck with me training-wise. It did not shift my JKD framework. I know Jeet Kune Do came after this, but it did not shift my fighting style framework whatsoever. It made zero impact on that. It made zero impact on my philosophy of the martial arts. It made zero impact on trinkety things. I don't have a sash. I don't have, they didn't do uniforms. They did t-shirts. I never got my t-shirt. Heck, my mom, who always took a bazillion photos, had the giant 90s camcorder recording every moment of me and my brother's lives growing up. Nothing. There is no, other than my memories and now this audio recording, there is no evidence that I ever did wushu. And that is really the reason why I have nothing to show for it, and so it's hard for me to count it as part of my training resume. So that is the first one that got away. And it's not my fault. It's not my fault that this one got away. The other two, totally my fault. Totally going to be my fault here in a moment. So what's funny about all three of these stories is that they all take place right around high school. They're all at different points in high school. These next two, though, happened after I started training in Jeet Kune Do, when my Bruce Lee era began. And the first one I want to highlight is Tang Soo Do, which I have jokingly said before here on the show. I think that was back during the 90-day black belt review, is that if I would have trained in Tong Sudo, or if at some point if I do, I would complete the holy trinity of Korean martial arts, because I've already done Taekwondo and I've gone on to do Hapkido, and Tong Sudo is like the third like big one. There's other martial arts out of Korea. That is like the third like other really well-known one. Honestly, though, I found out, I was doing a little bit of research recently. I was like, you never hear about grappling arts from Korea. Like, it's usually those three when you hear about, and Hapkido's got a little bit, but like, you never hear about grappling arts. What grappling arts? And there are like two, and one of them, I can't remember the name of it now. It's like Yongmu-do or something like that. Don't quote me on that, though. It's like Yongmu-do is this like hybrid style of Taekwondo, a folk wrestling style from Korea, and judo. And I was like, ooh, nobody even remotely near me is teaching that, but hey, that sounds good. That sounds like something I would really want to train in. Anyway, so I've made this joke before that, hey, if I do Tong Sudo, I've, completed the Holy Trinity. And actually that was an option on the table at one point. And this is like a simple one that I totally regret not training in. Yeah, training in Tong Sudo not only would have set me up to complete the Holy Trinity of Korean martial arts, but it was that dream thing that so many martial arts, or at least I assume so many martial arts, it's something that I have wanted to happen before of, hey, just come on over to my house and let's train. One of my buddies in high school, his stepdad was like a middle rank black belt in Tong Sudo, like third degree, fourth degree, something like that. And me and there was another guy who wanted to go pro, who I'm actually hoping, I'm going to reach out later this year to see if he wants to do an interview here on the show. He wanted to go pro in mixed martial arts, and me and him, and then like a couple other guys who just like wanted to work out, like the idea of training in martial arts. He just invited us all over, like, hey, do you want to come over, this evening at my house? I'll teach you guys Tong Sudo. And I can't remember if he was charging us. Like, that is like the dream scenario for me of like, hey, just come on over, $5, we'll train for a bit. That kind of a thing. Like, I'm kind of at that point in my life where I'm like, I should start doing that. I have this huge garage now, a decent sized backyard. I should just like start inviting people over to train, teach them some self-defense, teach them some trick kicks, whatever, like that kind of a thing. Never took them up on it. Just didn't. And there's a reason why. And even though this was something I wanted, but because this story and this reason is so similar to the third one, let me tell you about the third one. Because where I took Jeet Kune Do at, after Jeet Kune Do, after the class wrapped up, immediately following it was a Shaolin Kung Fu class taught by a different instructor, Sifu Bruce. And it immediately followed afterwards. It was still pretty cheap. I think I was paying like $20 a month doing Jeet Kune Do. Like, again, just like that super ideal, like, you think things are expensive now, like training in martial arts has always just kind of been expensive. So when you find those like, hey, just come hang out, we'll work out and I'll teach you some martial arts, or hey, $5 a class, whatever, like jump on that, unless it's like some hokey bullshito that they're teaching. Anyway, and so it was like right afterwards, I was already there. A lot of my fellow students went to the Shaolin class. Like, I was invited frequently to hang out and train. I don't even think he was going to charge me. He was just like, just hang out and train with us. And I never did. And this gets to why for both of them. When I look back and when I started training in Jeet Kune Do, that was the only time in the past 20 years, including my current job, where I actually felt confident going into it. I was like, yeah, I got this. And actually, when I started training in Wushu, there was a little bit of confidence there as well. Every other martial art I've trained in, I have been scared to start training. I mean, I probably talked about before I'm pretty sure I talked about in that first episode, like showing up for my very first day of Taekwondo, I was crying showing up at the Y to start training in Taekwondo. And honestly, there has always been, it's probably like another conversation for another day, there's always just been like this fear of, I'm actually not good at this. I'm actually not a good martial artist. And not in Jeet Kune Do for some reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because I had all this like prep work going into it. I don't know. But like when I think about Hapkido and Nippo Taijutsu rather, and when I started doing Ninja Zone, like there's always been like this I'm a fraud mentality. And that was part of the issue with Tang Soo Do, and that was part of the issue with Shaolin, is like I thought I was going to go in and it was going to be exposed that Brandon is a fraud. He's a terrible martial artist. I don't think I am, by the way. My tournament sparring career was very small, and I was okay. I knew very early on in my life I was never going to go pro in martial arts, but like become a professional fighter, that is. But like technique wise, I am a practitioner. Like I can mop the floor with a form. I can. Like that has always been my strong suit. But for some reason, thinking about trying a new style, whether it was Tang Soo Do or Shaolin at the time, I was actually like scared that people were going to like, oh, Brandon's actually a terrible martial artist. Never mind. We don't want you here. My value was attached to my skill of what I could do rather than a community just wanting to invite me in. Because I really think that's all it was. I think obviously there's always going to be some like toxic atmosphere in this kind of environment of like somebody who's probably is going to look down on me because I'm not as good as them. I'm short. I am. I've never have cared. I've never cared. I'm short. I'm not really like super buff. So yeah, there has always been taller dudes, taller girls than me. There's always been stronger people than me. So yeah, I've had these limitation moments, but like I have never seen the invitation as an invitation to be a part of a community. I have seen it as somebody is trying to prove I'm not good. My value was attached to my skill level. And I can see that now. And that's part of the reason why I talked about at the beginning of like, it is okay to have a healthy view of regrets. That's, I was at high school. I was a teenager. So obviously I'm going to have those kind of thoughts. But hey, I'm also 30 now and I still have those thoughts. So like, I need to learn from that. I need to learn that, hey, I need to be comfortable with myself. And like, yeah, I'm not a perfect martial artist or have perfect build, but like I have something to bring to the table here. But the other reason why not only did I have this, and still at times do have this struggle of my skill level is not good enough and people are going to think I'm a fraud and a fake and a imposter syndrome kind of thing. The other thing is that I felt like a burden to my parents. Just to get right to it, because also our time's starting to draw to an end here. Look, my parents sacrificed a lot for me and my brothers growing up. And high school was not a great time for my family. There was a lot of difficulties going on. And admittedly, looking back now, I don't know if I could have done all three, Jeet Kune Do, Shaolin, and Tang Soo Do when I was in high school. Just logistically, even if I didn't have all these like burdens on my mind at the time, like I don't know if I could have done all three, period. The Jeet Kune Do Shaolin thing would have been the easiest because they were literally at the same place right after each other. But I just felt like a burden. My parents sacrificed a lot for us, for me and my brothers growing up. And not only that, when I first learned how to drive, I had a driving restriction and I couldn't drive at night. So they were constantly driving me around. If I wanted to do anything at night or had to be somewhere at night, they had to drive me even once I got my license. And so with everything that was going on in my household at the time, I felt like a burden to them. And thankfully that one has changed. I don't feel like a burden to my parents anymore. that one took some time to grow out of that, but it did take some time to grow out of that, but I am in a better place with that now. So I willingly chose not to do a lot of things when I was in high school, not because I didn't want to or anything like that. It was, I felt like a burden to my parents to ask yet again, hey, could you drive me to I never went over to my friends' houses when I was in high school. I never went over there because to a lot of my friends. I rarely spent time outside of the house, at least from my memory, when I was in high school, because I just felt like I was going to be burdening them, and they had already sacrificed so much for us. So yeah. And again, it's like, well, Shaolin was still right there. So and I had just said earlier in this episode that I really wanted to have trained in a Kung Fu style. And I still do. That is like, I have a martial art bucket list, and maybe that's another episode for sure, especially since we only have a couple minutes left, that I do have a martial art bucket list of like things I want to train in, places I want to go, things I want to do. And thankfully, I did find out there's not a lot of Kung Fu in my area. Not anymore, at least. Apparently, in high school, it was aplenty. But there is a place near me that does Tai Chi. And it's like a very serious, like, Taoist environment. So I'm pretty interested because I could learn a style and also be challenged spiritually as well, I think. So that might be something we talk about. Or maybe I will pick up that loose thread of wushu and just teach myself how to do it. We'll see. But hey, that is my stories of the ones that got away. A little bit of heartbreak in my life. But like I said, regret's not always a bad thing. Sometimes we need to look back and learn from our mistakes, but also not be defined by our regret. But hey, our time's almost up here, so let's wrap things up. Thank you all for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, please make sure you're following Kung Fu Pizza Party on Instagram at KungFuPizzaPrty, and on Letterboxd, Kung Fu Pizza Party without an A. That is KungFuPizzaPrty. On Letterboxd, you get to get the review of the movie before the episode comes out, so you get a little bit of a taste of what's to come. And on Instagram, we got conversations going on over there, and we want you all to be a part of it. Thank you for listening. This has been Kung Fu Pizza Party, where I've delivered high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and served up some wisdom, one slice at a time.